Greetings, guys. So we are live and we are talking about the Holy Odu today. So the Holy Odu is, of course, what is connected to an Ifa reading. This is what is recited and what's given to a person whenever they receive an Ifa reading. And we're going to get into the intricacies of the Holy Odu in this session. So we're going to talk about so many different dynamics related to it, like what it is and how it's used in Ifa divination and how you can actually use it in everyday life to help you out and to grow and things like that. As people come in, I do want to remind you guys to definitely sign up for our newsletter. In it, you're going to get a whole lot of deep level information beyond what I publish on my blog and social media and things like that. Likewise, you're going to be able to get deeper level insight about what's going on in the Ifa tradition and also some personal revelations that I've had and some of my clients, etc. And you'll also get like the blog updates if you want to stay connected to us through that, because we publish things about the Holy Odu, astrology, and different aspects of Ifa. And definitely you'll get a chance to know whenever we go live and so forth and so on. You'll get an opportunity to contribute more deeply to some of the things that we do at Asanee 44 as far as bringing you these lives and other type of educational content. So greetings everybody who is joining. I have a few people coming in on different platforms and I welcome you all. Thank you all for showing up again. So again, we're talking about the Holy Odu. We're going to go ahead and jump into the discussion right now. And first, just start by looking at what is the Holy Odu in Ifa. What is Odu Ifa, or however you want to say it. Alafia, everyone. Alafia, everybody coming in. So, what is the Holy Odu all about? Most people know is the verses, the sacred verses of Ifa, which it is. So it's about 256 verses in combination, because it's a combination of what we call the major Odu plus the minor Odu. So we're going to get into the discrepancies in those two shortly. But together they combine to make up a total of 256 sacred verses that represent the core areas of our lives. So I'm going to use an example, two different examples for you, depending on where you come from. So for those of you all who come maybe from a Christian background, you can kind of think of it in the context of the Bible. For you all who come from a more spiritually based background, then you can maybe think of it in the context of like the tarot, right? Especially when we break it down to the major and the minor aspects. Peace and love, everybody. Thank you all for joining again. So when we're looking at the Odu, as I said before, those are the major aspects of life. Where did it come from? It actually came down from Olodumare. It was passed to Orunmila Ifa, the oracle of the tradition. Okay, and so as I said before, it speaks on the different things that we will all experience in this life at some point. Now, obviously, you're not going to want to be experiencing everything all at once, but this is why we get Ifa readings. Okay, and this is also a great reason why you should, if you can, if you desire to, I don't want to say should, but if it's something that you desire, to read, to connect with the Odu on a regular basis, because it does give you inspiration and guidance, and it can, really change your mindset, especially if you pull it open and you're going through something at that time. But do keep in mind that these are guidelines for the reading. So it's not that you can just go and open up an Odu book or something like that, and that's the Odu that actually applies to you. Okay, don't get that part confused, and we're going to separate that a little bit later on. So now, as far as the Odu goes, you do have those major Odu, as I said before. Those are the 16, right? Those are the major aspects of our life. So going back to my examples I said before. So when you look at it from a biblical context, you can kind of think about it as like a book of the Bible. if you will, right? If you are looking at it from the perspective of tarot, you can look at it as the major arcana. Matter of fact, that's where that concept kind of came from in relation to our thoughts and our knowledge that we had before as Africans. Definitely from the Odu and from the Yoruba tradition itself, but also from ancient African civilizations way back in Egypt and things like that. Okay. You're very, very welcome. Hope you said glad that I clarified that point. Very welcome. So those are the global aspects. So it could represent anything like death, life, your relationships, rebirth, pretty much whatever you're going through, right? And so the minor Odu are going to be the combination of verses. So it could be a combination of so many different things that are going on. It really just depends, again, as far as what happens in your reading. This is where you're going to get down to the core of what's going on, right? And so looking at it from a biblical perspective, I'm going to actually use the books of Psalms and Proverbs because that will be a little bit more in alignment with the example that I want to give. So, you know, the book of Psalms, these are songs, so to speak, right? That tell different narratives and talk about things that people went through. The book of Proverbs is the book of wise sayings. If you go into either of those books in the Bible, you can pull out a verse or what have you that applies to your particular situation in life. It may or may not apply at that particular time, but it will apply globally, right? And so you can kind of think about the minor Odu in that perspective when you get deep, deep, deep into the scriptures. Thank you, Sin. Nice example with the Psalms and Proverbs. Thank you for that. Also, you know, for those coming from the context of tarot, so this is really simple because, again, that was put in the context of what we do with the Odu. So when you have the minor arcana in the tarot deck, those are the ones that get down to the nitty gritty, to the specifics of what's going on in your life. Now, either of the Odu could actually come out. You can actually get a major Odu whenever you get an Ifa reading. So it can come out in so many different ways. It's important to note that, again, you want to get a reading and you want to apply what comes from your particular reading, because even though you are going to get that Odu, certain things may apply to you that may not apply to another person who gets that same Odu in their reading. So we're going to look at some of the key components of what an Odu would typically include. All of them aren't the exact same thing, but in general, these are some of the things you're going to find. It's basically oral literature, wise sayings, teachings, parables, even so historical narratives and events that have occurred. All of those things are put together in the Odu that was passed down from Olodumare to Orunmila. And this is a very, very important concept to understand. Like, everything was oral. Okay. Now we do have the Odu. I should have brought my book, but I don't have my Odu with me so I can show you. There are people who have written these sayings down and so forth and so on. But it's not the exact as somebody reciting this exact same thing, I should say, as someone reciting the Odu orally. So do keep that in mind. The Odus that are available out there, they're not complete, for one, and all of them are not 100% based on true Yoruba culture. Okay, I do recommend one. You'll see it on my website, but even that one has some discrepancies and some diasporic things that are outlined in there. So you do have to be careful when you're reading it. When you're trying to understand it on your own, you definitely want to ask if you are unsure about certain things, because, again, it's going to be based on Ifa. Matter of fact, I'll give you guys an example of what I mean here. So one, I was reading, I forget which Odu it was, but it said something about the person who that Odu applies to should set up an ancestor altar. Well, ancestor altars are not part of Yoruba culture. I don't know why that person put it that way. It could be because they're trying to appeal to the global audience and get people to understand based on like the Western concept, but that's not a thing. So instead, that was more so for somebody who should be really taking care of their ancestors on a high level. They should be giving offerings and sacrifices to their ancestors and making sure that the ancestors are well situated and so forth and so on, because that individual is closely connected to their ancestral heritage. So definitely be careful, guys, when you are consuming resources such as that, any type of resource when it comes to EFOP, because there are so many discrepancies out there. Like I can tell you, I'm constantly with our Odessa whenever I read something, and it's not something that I heard before, or if it's not resonating with me, like this doesn't sound right, doesn't sound like typical Europe or culture or what have you. I'm constantly, hey, is this right? Is that right? So forth and so on. And he gives me a lot of intel about these types of things. So if you do have questions, definitely try to go to somebody and ask about things like that, anything related to the tradition. Because I always say this, most of the references that are out there about the tradition, especially in writing, on the internet, things like that, those references are coming out of the Caribbean. Not to say that those traditions are wrong, but they are not authentic, true Ishesha. Okay, those are African derived traditions that went through a whole lot of different things before after rather, they left Yoruba land, Nigeria. And so they look a little bit different. Something else that is going to be associated with an Odu is an Orisha. Typically, it's going to be one prominent Orisha linked to every Odu. And so that Odu will speak about the energy and the aspects of that particular Orisha and how that energy applies to that person's situation at that time. That Orisha will likely have to be fed based on whatever comes out for that particular person. And so it's very important too to have that aspect linked to it. Sometimes it's actually multiple Orishas, but most of the time it's still going to be one primary Orisha, even if there are multiple Orishas that are spoken of or about in that particular Odu interpretation. Now, I've talked about this before. I talk about it all the time. Taboos can come out in an Odu. They don't always come out. So it's not necessary that you're going to go and get an Ifa reading, and in that Odu, you will get taboos. It can happen. It happens quite frequently, but it's not necessary that it will. So if you're seeking out taboos, if like your goal is to know more about your taboos, it's not that you're going to get all of your taboos and your permanent taboos and so forth and so on in one Ifa reading. Matter of fact, you won't get your permanent taboos until you actually go and do the full initiation process. However, you may get, some taboos that come out that could be permanent. As I said before, if it's linked to like a specific Orisha, like your head Orisha, for instance, Obatala, you're told, not to wear red, not to get angry, not to drink palm oil. Those things apply for life, but that's related to the specific Orisha and not like your path in Ifa per se. Okay. But you may get those taboos, which are sacred restrictions telling you what you should not be doing, right? What you agreed to not do before you came into this experience. This is something that is so paramount. I preach on taboos a lot because I personally feel that a lot of the issues that we have in the African diaspora as a whole come from people not knowing their taboos. People are violating taboos all the time. I see it all the time on social media. Some of the things that people think are just completely benign are actually violation of taboos. And until we get that right as a people group, until we get back on course with our holistic traditions, so it's not just the taboos, but violating taboos keeps a lot of people off course and from really and truly fulfilling their destiny in the way that they should, because they are constantly out of alignment because of those violations. And that's just because they don't know, right? So it's nothing to be held against anybody in particular. You don't know what you don't know. And that's the situation that we're living in the modern world for many people throughout the diaspora, even on the African continent, even so in, West Africa, where the tradition derives from, right? So that's a thing as well. Another major part of an Odu is going to be the sacrifice, the remedies. This is something that we talk about a lot, and I'm probably going to do a completely separate live stream on Ebo because I get a lot of questions about about this particular dynamic because people get confused about it. So, in an Ifa reading, it can come out with multiple sacrifices. It really just depends. Like it could be 4 for one person, it could be 6 for another person, it could be 7 for a different person, right? So you never know until you actually get the reading. If somebody brings you an elbow or even so gives you a price for an elbow before you do an E5 reading, you need to run away from that person because they don't know what is going to be the elbow because that comes through the Odu that's generated. And if there's a preset price, that means that they're just doing the basic elbow for everybody. They're just probably feeding like the lowest level animal that in a particular Orisha takes. So definitely be careful about that because that changes that could be different. As I said before, even two people with the same Odu, the Ebo may be different as far as you might be feeding the same Orisha, but one person may be feeding that Orisha a chicken, another person may be feeding that person a goat, depending on what resonates best or most with them at that particular time. So like be very, very careful of these types of dynamics when it comes to readings and things like that. Greetings, greetings, greetings. I would just thank you for coming in. Appreciate you being here with us. So he is online. I hope he stays online. Sometimes the Nigerian network is not so strong for any of you all who have dealt with it before. Okay, so when an Odu comes out, it's going to come out in one or of two aspects. So it could be Iri or Ibi. So Iri is basically going to be the good aspect. So basically saying, I'm trying to make sure I'm pronouncing it right because I always get this word confused with Irie. I'm a reggae head, right? So I listen to a lot of reggae music and I actually think the word, I never looked it up, but I'm sure that word came from the same place because Irie in like the Jamaican culture is meaning something good, something that you vibe with. So it's Irie in the Yoruba tradition, meaning that that's a good aspect. And Ibi is the negative aspect. Let me take a quick questions. So off topic, somewhat maybe. I think I'm violating a taboo now that you mentioned Obatala and red. I'm initiated and his daughter and my hair is red. My elbows and my Odu didn't mention anything. So yeah, if you're a child of Obatala, I would definitely not have red hair because you don't want to have that color around you. Like Obatala is the king of the white cloth. So you, most of the time you want to deal with white if possible. It's not like you have to wear white all the time, but lighter colors and things like that. But DM me, right? We can have a deeper conversation about that. But thank you for that question because that is a really good question to bring up. And it's something like that's really unique, right, to our times because there probably wasn't a thing when the tradition came out. Okay, you're saying E-Ray, E-Ray. So our this is telling me that the pronunciation is E-Ray. I know I am horrible with pronouncing foreign words in general, so I'm not the best at this. So do not copy me when I say any type of foreign word, Yoruba word, etc. Okay. So absolutely, yeah. Red and black can be a thing too, and when it comes to Obatala, red is not good for any child of Obatala, right? But some people might have like that black intermingled into it. It depends on the person. You're very, very welcome. It does depend on the person, okay? But going back to these dynamics, so the reading can come out with E-ray, E-ray, which is the good aspect. That doesn't mean that everything is going to be okay for you, right? It just means that predominantly there are good things that are going to happen or that are going on in your life, things like that. EB would be obviously the negative aspect, and the same thing. It's not that everything is bad or going to be negative in your life. However, in general, you are dealing with some negativities that you really, really need to deal with, especially if EB comes out in that reading. Okay. So the next part would be incantation. So all of the Odu have the incantations. Those are the invocations that are going to be performed based on the message of that Odu. These are the things that are going to be said during ritual work and things of that nature. Typically, if you're new to the tradition and you don't know what you're doing, we don't really advise for you to start working with the incantations like that until you know what's going on. We do have a class though, an Orisha course right now, where you can take that and we talk about the incantations and we walk you through and guide you through like how to say it and what it means and things like that. I definitely recommend that people understand what they're saying, because there's no need to just go and just say incantations and you don't really understand what you are saying. Okay. That's like a major reason why I learned patois because I love reggae music, but I wanted to know what I was saying. I didn't want to just say anything. And so it's kind of the same concept there. Understand what you're saying. You can absolutely speak it in English if you want to. It's best to speak it in the Yoruba language because that's where the tradition was derived from. And in our course, we teach it in both. We teach the what is taught in the Yoruba tongue, but we also say what that means in the English language. So definitely check that out for those of you all who are interested in digging deeper into the incantations and really knowing what is said and how to work with that energy of an sorry, how to work with the energy of an Orisha in a more at a higher level. I'll say that we're at a higher level when it comes to the tradition. Okay. Now, also included in an Odu would be the historical and the mythological narrative. So most Odu are going to come with this and it will tell about different aspects of things that the Orisha went through in their life, or either some historical events that surrounded that particular Odu or what was going on during that particular time. So that's also going to help with you understanding what's going on with you and how to navigate those particular situations when it comes to like the Odu that's generated in your particular reading. Those are the major components of an Odu. Of course, there are so many different intricacies. I am not an Ianifa because I do get that question all the time. So I am not the one to tell you exactly, what the Odu says and things like that. Whenever we do readings, like our Odessa is very, very thorough in explaining everything that is laid out in that Odu so that you know what's going on, especially for the perspective of someone who is not like native to the Ifa tradition. So definitely, if you get that through us, you'll be walked through that process in depth by our Odessa. He's excellent when it comes to like helping people understand the tradition in more depth. Okay. One of the common questions that I get about the Odu is like, do initiates or have you have to learn and memorize the Holy Odu? You don't have to, right? Unless you choose to become an Ifa priest or priest. In that case, definitely is integral to your role in serving people in doing Ifa divination or what have you. You definitely need to know it there. You were not required to know it if you are an initiate. Your personal Odu, that's important for you for sure. But otherwise, it's not like you have to go through all 256 verses and know them by memory, etc. Okay. Can non-initiate study or understand the Odu? Absolutely. I mean, you can definitely study it if you desire to do so. You can study it in the Yoruba language if that's what you choose as well. Now, if you don't speak Yoruba, you don't read and write Yoruba, that part is going to be difficult to understand. But as I said before, there are translated or transliterated works available that you can buy in Odu if you desire to and read it in the English language. But the caveat there is to definitely be careful, um, understanding that, for one, even if it's somebody who is Yoruba and writing that for you, there are just some words that are just not translatable. You're just not going to get the meaning of it. So you're not going to get the full scope of it unless you really understand and speak the Yoruba language to a high level. Alafia, everybody who is coming in, greetings to you. Thank you all for joining us. So yeah, that is something to consider, but you can study it, you can understand it. Like, you guys see me put out the Odu verses all the time on Instagram and things like that. And even so, now I'm doing it more so on the website and explaining them in more depth to give you all more knowledge about them. So you can definitely get those details on your own. That being said, all right, it's not, I know about the Odu for sure, but our Odysseus and I work in collaboration with that. He helps me out a lot to understand it and present it in a way that can be translated in English so that people who speak the English language can understand them in more depth. But again, there's a whole lot more. Even like if you see an Odu on my IG page, there's a whole lot more behind it than what you see. Those are general messages. And again, when you get a reading or something like that from us, that will be explained to you in depth. I don't know what other readers do. I've gotten other readings before where I didn't get it explained in deep depth to me as far as what's going on with that Odu. So it just depends on where you go. If you do want more information about it, ask the person who's doing your reading so that you can, gain a deeper level of understanding of what that's all about. Personal Odu. So this is a very, very important concept as well. A personal Odu is what you get once you get initiated, right? You will, an Odu will come out if you just do what is it, Isefa? So you just receive your hand of Ifa. However, that's not permanent. It's not permanent until you do full-on initiation. When you do full-on initiation, that's going to be what typically is referred to as your personal Odu, your life Odu, what you're going to live with and, operate by according to what you already agreed to before you came into the earthly realm. And so that is going to be very, very important for you. Definitely recommend you memorizing it and knowing it because it impacts, your life, your holistic life. So it's very, very important for you to keep that in mind. Okay. Every time though that you get a reading, every single time you get a reading, an Odu is going to be generated. All right, at least one Odu, and it's going to speak to your circumstances at that particular time. These are not life Odus. These are not personal Odus, though. All right, this is just the Odu that came out in your reading at that time based on what you're dealing with. It could be that you're dealing with sickness, you could be dealing with relationship issues, so forth and so on. And the Odu is going to bring out that information and tell you what you need to do about it, tell you what sacrifices and things like that, if it's any taboos or even so warnings. And I didn't put that up there. I forgot to talk about warnings. So warnings are another aspect of Odu. Warnings are similar to taboos, but they're not the same. Taboos are like sacred restrictions, like you should not do this. Warnings is like, okay, you shouldn't do this, but if you do, you got some leniency and you may not be as impacted as bad. So think about like a traffic light. Okay, the warning would be like a yellow light, whereas the taboo would be like a red light, complete full-on stop. All right, I hope that was a good example for you all as far as the differences between those two. So if you do get an E5 reading and you're unsure if something is a taboo or a warning, definitely ask about that. Again, this is something we tell people from the door, like this is a warning versus this is a taboo. It's not that like you just do the warning anyway, right? Just because, well, I get, I got some little space to slide, right? But it's more so like it may be like certain colors are better for you, right? It's not, it may not be not nothing harsh. It's like don't wear red, but it may be like it's better for you to wear lighter colors. This is going to help you out more so than wearing dark colors. And it may not be a full-on taboo, but you may work in a job or something like that where you have to wear dark colors and there's no way around it, especially if you're living in the Western world. There are some provisions that can be made when it comes to religious things. However, if you work for a company and the full-on uniform is dark, then yeah, you might not need to work for that particular company. Or if it's a warning, then it may be okay. There may be some things that you can do to kind of tie that situation up, but I probably just say like, try your best not to work for that company. And I know that's easier said than done sometimes. Okay. Lee, let's see. You are saying, I received the divination with an American ear that came out of Agio. She broke down each Odu in terms of the Orisha associated and some things to look out for. However, the translation information I found online from Western African sources were very different. This could be the case. This is often the case, right? Very much so often the case. And it depends on what part she was pulling from. So she might have only been focusing on one particular aspect of it. I don't want to speak too much to those situations because they can be so very, very different. And I'm not the one to say that somebody's reading is right or wrong, right? And even so, I would not be the one to say somebody is right or wrong, unless he did the reading himself and he could tell you like this is what came out from what I got. But just in general, there are a lot of discrepancies for what we see on the continent and what we see in the Western world. And also, you're saying that you found West African sources online. That can be a little bit here and there as well, just because you don't really know where it came from. Anybody can get online and say, like, this source is from West Africa, but is it really from West Africa? And even so, just because it's from West Africa or Nigeria or what have you, doesn't mean that it's a bona fide, legitimate owl, because that's another thing as well. It's a lot of people that, because the tradition is becoming more and more popular, they come through and they can easily say, I'm an owl, I do readings, so forth and so on. And they may not even be there. And they could be Nigerian, they could be Black Nigerian, and they may just not be legit. So this is one of the reasons why I harp on also working with your intuition, working with your ancestors, building up your intuition so that you know what's what, because there's a lot of people out there playing around, right? And so just because somebody is saying that there's something doesn't necessarily mean that they are what they say they are. So you have to temper that. If you are feeling like lost or confused about it, maybe try to get a reading from someone else, maybe even two different people, to try to validate what is what before you move forward, especially with getting elbow and sacrifices and things like that. Because you want to be careful with like doing too much ritual work, especially if it's not the right ritual work, because people can mess that up too and cause you some problems, because we've had that issue in the past where people have done all kind of stuff and cause curses and problems in other people's lives. So we had to go in and get it undone. Well, I want to say we, because I didn't do the work, but he did. So there are some things that you have to be careful with. You have to be really, really careful and know who you're dealing with. You're saying, can I speak on the mechanics of dreams as they relate to Ifa, like do's, don'ts, and how to cultivate it? Are you saying cultivate your dream world? I don't know what you mean by the do's and don'ts as far as dreams go. Like dreams are paramount in Ifa, any African tradition. It's difficult to say, exactly if a dream meant something or not, right? So sometimes you can dream and it could definitely be foreshadowing something that's happening in the future or even right now. It could be really definitively trying to tell you something. Other times it could be nothing at all. So I don't really get the part about, the do's and don'ts, like what questions you have there, if you could really clarify that for me. Another question, what is your opinion on receiving a reading and not following through with the guidance given? I don't recommend it at all. I always say if you're going to get an E5 reading, be prepared to do the elbow, be prepared to follow up with everything that comes after it. The sacrifices, definitely. The warnings, the taboos. This is why I always say don't just go and get an E4 reading just because you think it's something fun to do, just because you think you're going to get some information from it. If you're not following through for a reason, for instance, maybe you don't feel it was legit, it makes you feel off, it makes you feel nervous, that's different. But if you just make the decision to not go and do the elbow, you shouldn't do the reading in the first place. Yes, there are also situations where the elbow can be very, very expensive, more so depending on, your budget or what have you. You may not be able to afford it all at that time. What we always recommend is to start with the most important ones, start working on it. Ask the Orisha, ask your ancestors to give you the finances or whatever it is you need in order to get the rest of it done. It's not that you should not do the rest. So I want to clarify that. You should do all of it. But if you can't do it all at one time, start with the most important ones and work your way through it. But ultimately, don't do a reading unless you're ready for that reality. Get a general estimate of what your elbow could be, possibly. And it's hard to tell, right? Because I always use the example for us, we're very transparent. Generally, between 500 to 1,000, that's what you're looking at for elbow. It could be more than that. It could be less than that. And this is for the entire thing. So, for instance, let's say 6 Orisha come up in your reading. It could be that, you have to, the cost rather is like about $1,300 or something like that. So I'm talking about for the whole thing. I'm not saying like one elbow is like elbow is like $500 or something like that. So it just depends. It could be 100. It really depends on the person, what they charge. So kind of pull that information out from them if you possibly can. Okay. You're saying thank you. I agree. It's regarding a loved one, not me. Okay, I understand. Yes. Sorry for like being long-winded there, but I talk about that all the time because some people like to play around with the tradition, or they like to use it like they think they're getting a psychic reading, and that's not what it is. Okay. Another question, if they seem like a forecast, is it wrong to speak on it before fruition? So it depends on the dream. I honestly would not speak on my dream. I do not speak on my dream to anybody aside from, like, I would talk to our audience about it for sure, because if it's something that's bothering me, I'm like, you got to check this because, yeah, I feel like there's something that's going on, and he'll let me know. And so once he lets me know, like, is it okay to talk about it to somebody else or not? I'll know that after I get the interpretation done, right? Sometimes definitely I'll speak to my husband about it or something like that, like, oh, I just had this dream or what have you. But, I know my husband is going to run and tell anybody. So you have to be careful with who you tell if you know, like, you're talking to somebody who's going to tell everybody else around you. In general, I just don't recommend oversharing at all. Like, just be careful with what you tell people and who you tell things to. because you could actually, again, you could be violating some of your taboos, just oversharing stuff with people, and you don't even know it. And I see that, I see that too much on social media. People are constantly oversharing, and they don't know that they are violating um, some warnings, some taboos, and things like that. And it's causing them problems because they're talking too much to people. So, in general, I'm just going to advise, like, don't talk to people about it until you know the situation yourself. If you're having a dream about someone, and if you're asking like that, like you had a dream about somebody, and you're wondering, like, should you tell that person about that particular dream? It really just depends. If you feel like pressed, like you have to do it, then I would say do it. But check in with yourself, check in with your aura, your ancestors, to see if that's something that you should do. If you have a regular priest or priestess, ask them about it. Okay, because it could be something, it could be nothing. So, just check. Like, if I do have something from, sometimes I've had dreams, yeah, and it's like it just wakes me up, and it's about a specific person, and I might just get up and just call that person, like, hey, I just had this dream back to back in a row. I know it means something. This is what it is. You need to check, this situation out. But it just depends on where you are in that particular scenario, like how strongly you know yourself and you understand your dream state. Okay. So going back to the Odu topic, how does understanding the Odu empower your spiritual journey? So this is the last section that I do want to go through here, guys. If you have any more questions, please be sure to go ahead and put them in the chat so we can get them out. Okay. You're asking about the hand of Ifa covers the scope of what in relation to a person. So the hand of Ifa is the icon. That is where you are going to work with the Ifa icon to get deeply connected to Ifa so you can understand your destiny, your journey better. You're going to be working with it and giving it offerings yourself, praying to the Orisha, doing your incantations and things like that. The more you work with the hand of Ifa, the better you're going to be able to work out your destiny and just understand your path better. It makes your life smooth on so many different levels. Like, for me, I can say I feel like I've gotten so much more enlightened. I feel like my whole Ori, if you will, is like really open up on a different level once I did my hand of Ifa. Everybody's journey is different, but that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to connect you closer to Ifa or Rumula, which is the oracle, right? The oracle of destiny that knows everybody's destiny. So if you're close to that source, you'll have a better understanding of what path you should be taking. Okay. You're asking cultivation part. Is there practices that you can do more or less of to strengthen the ability to dream and to do just come when they come? Okay. I'm going to tell you to DM me on that, and I can give you some more guidance on that particular part, because there are some things that you can do to potentiate your dreams. And so I think it's better that we kind of do that one-on-one, okay? So how does understanding the Holy Odu empower your spiritual journey? I already talked about this part. So with Ifa divination, you're going to get insight from the Holy Odu to know what you should be doing at that particular moment, what you should or should not be doing, right? Because it could come with some taboos, warnings, and things like that, etc. What are you saying here? I love your answer to many questions I haven't wanted to know. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm happy that I'm getting out your answers. I hope I'm getting them out succinctly for you guys. But during the reading, you're going to get the Odu, and it's going to tell you generally what's going on with you at that particular time. So that right there, if you follow through, right? So you get your reading, you get the ritual work performed. it's going to make your life better on so many different levels, because you can avoid problems that are coming up. You can open up pathways for your blessings to come through, and you're just going to experience life better in general if you're working with it in that way. On a daily basis, it can serve as a source of inspiration and motivation, right? So if you pick up that Odu, or if you're getting Odus, like you guys, many of you all who follow me on Instagram, you see the Odu post. Like, I've heard so many times from people when it comes out, people like, oh my God, I just needed this. I needed to hear this today. And trust me, I'm the same way, because a lot of times I'll do the Odus like 2 3 weeks in advance. And so when it actually publishes on Instagram and I see it myself, it's like, wow, I needed to see this today. So it was just a blessing, a source of true inspiration, especially knowing that it came from, a Romula, that it came from Olodumare actually originally, but it came from the Oracle of Wisdom. And so it's very helpful in trying times, in times of need, if you're just reading the Odu on a daily basis. Again, reading the Odu is not the same as getting a Ifa reading. For those of you all who are just coming in, to add clarity there. Um, you're saying the Odu in the hand of Ifa is what I meant, because I know Itefa is permanent. What is the relation to destiny? So that is your destiny. That's your life path when you get Itefa, right? So you're saying the hand of Ifa. I'm assuming that you mean Itefa. But when you get your Odu during Itefa, right? That's your life path. That's your destiny. It's telling you what you chose, and what path you should be going down, and how to go down that path in a rightful way. So I guess that's what you mean. I hope I answered your question there. Okay, so that's it on a daily basis. It also helps you know that you're not alone in your challenges, because the Orishas and many of our ancestors went through so many different things and trials in their daily life, and so that it's common to man, right? Whenever you see an Odu, whenever you get an Odu, know that Odu came from somebody else having gone through that experience before you. So you're not the only one that's living in that particular circumstance or situation. And because somebody else overcame that, you can overcome it as well if you take the right steps. Again, the reading is not just about you having that information, like this is what's going on in your life at this time, but instead about this is what's going on in your life at this time, and this is what you need to do about it in order to make it better, in order to move forward. And on a final note here, it also reminds you to get back on track and stay balanced when you stay closely connected to the words and the sacred verses of the Odu, because it's all about balance. Everything in Ifa and any form of indigenous spirituality is about balance and harmony. That's why we do the sacrifices there. But you do that in order to balance yourself out in whatever area that you're having challenges in. You're going to give the sacrifices and the offerings. The Orishas are going to come to your aid to help you out, and you will see that manifest over time. Not as I can give you a specific time. It can manifest immediately for some people. For other people, it might take a couple of weeks, couple of months. For some people, it could take it could take years to see the full-on manifestation, but if you do ritual work, you should start to see some changes. Probably within the first year. Usually doesn't take that long, but it depends on the scenario. So I'm not one, nobody can really tell you at all, like how long it's going to take for something to manifest. It's just not the way it is. Awesome live. Grateful for this clarifying information. Ashe, my dear. Thank you for coming and supporting. I appreciate you always. Any more questions, guys? Because that is all I had, like as far as prepared to talk to you all about. So I got about 10 more minutes that I can stay with you right now. If you do have any more questions, and for anybody like that needs further, information, definitely DM me. We'll talk about like the dream situation as far as how to potentiate your dreams. I'll probably, if you guys want to live on that, I can even do that later on. But I don't want to get too deep into that topic in this particular live. You are very, very welcome. You're welcome, guys. I appreciate you all for showing up. Thank you all for supporting us. Let us know if you have any more questions. I am going to go ahead and end here since I don't see my live schedule. So I'm trying to figure it out. Lately, I've been doing Mondays at 11 a.m. Arizona time. Arizona time, not Mountain Standard Time. Because people get that confused. This is why I have a lot of problems with Arizona. We don't change time. And this is why I say that. So sometimes people look at Mountain Standard Time. I'm going to try to get that updated somewhere because I haven't quite figured it out. I'm trying to really see what works best for the most people, right? Because I'm actually live on 4 platforms right now. And so I'm trying to see like when are more people available that I can catch you guys. Because I know this is like lunch hour for some people. And, you know, I guess it's better for you if it is your lunch hour or what have you. So once I get like a permanent time, I will definitely update that. I'll update it on Instagram and YouTube. But typically Mondays, 11 Arizona time. And I think I'm 2 hours behind Eastern Standard Time right now. But when your time changes, I'll be 3 hours behind you. That's why I keep harping on Arizona time versus Mountain Standard Time, because Mountain Time changes. Arizona, we don't. There are parts of Arizona that are on Mountain Standard Time, though, that do change. And I hope I didn't just confuse you with all of that. But yeah, I have a whole lot of challenges when it comes to scheduling and things like that because we maintain the time where I am in Arizona. But any more questions, guys? Anybody else? Okay, beautiful. So I really, really appreciate everybody who has showed up. Hit me up in the DM if you have any further clarifying questions. Ashe, guys, please have a very blessed and beautiful day and beyond.